continued today in Syria. 200 people arrested in an overnight raid as thousands demonstrate near Damascus at the same time. A human rights group reporting Syria just released 70 political prisoners. And stocks in Saudi Arabia soaring more than 2% today. That's right, the market was open there, one of the few on the planet that was. All reacting to the kingdom's $130 billion plan, some say buy-off to sort of keep the peace there, handing out checks to average folks. Well, with the bombs in Libya dropping, the costs for the U.S. are indeed mounting. All the while, Arab League nations who urged us to do this are nowhere to be seen helping. So maybe we should send them the bill to John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He's in Des Moines, Iowa, where he's going to be among the prominent speakers at this Republican presidential hopefuls confab at the conservative conference. Ambassador, what do you make of that? Or if you're not going to participate, Arab League, at least as we thought you might as well pick up the check. What do you think?
Well, I think there's considerable merit to that. You know, when we expelled Saddam Hussein from Kuwait in 1991, there were significant contributions from Japan, from the Arab world, from other countries that benefited from it. So I'm not saying we don't benefit as well, and we certainly should bear some of the cost if we can oust Gaddafi. That should be our real objective, but I don't see why others who benefit can't contribute a little bit as well.
Ambassador, Hillary Clinton and the president, again on Monday, I suppose, will emphasize the Arab League has been helpful and has stepped forward and has put a lot on the line. Do you agree with that?
I think they've put some on the line. I particularly think the two countries, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, that are supplying planes for the no-fly zone are making an important contribution. But nobody should be under any illusions. This is an American-led operation. Its success or failure will be seen as a success or failure for the United States. And I think it's why the president has got to focus on what our real strategic interest is, which is getting rid of Muammar Gaddafi.
If we do not, then what? In other words, if we end this essentially without having done that, has this failed?
Absolutely. I think it's an enormous blow to American credibility. It risks, if Gaddafi stays in power, that he will do as he has threatened and return to international terrorism. And I think almost certainly he will return to his pursuit of nuclear weapons. There's another scenario, and that is that nobody clearly wins or clearly loses, that the country remains in a low-grade civil war for a long time. That's bad, too, to the extent Gaddafi's still around, but to the extent there's anarchy, there's a risk that, as in Somalia now, al-Qaeda or other international terrorists can take advantage of that and begin their own terrorism campaigns.
Now, we mentioned earlier, Ambassador, the growing unrest in Syria. We left out, but we'll include later on what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Bahrain. This is sort of Mideast-wide now. The Saudis doing their best part, maybe to buy off such opposition. And one of the reasons why their market was up today on the belief that maybe handing out $130 billion worth of aid and checks will do the trick. We don't know. But it is spreading. How bad does this get?
Well, I think we should not take our eye off the ball, that for all the trouble we've seen in many Arab countries, the real issue here is whether Iran can take advantage of it in Bahrain, as you mentioned, in Saudi Arabia possibly, in pursuit of Iran's long-held goal of hegemony in the region and in the broader Muslim world. If Iran can, for example, get a pro-Iranian government in Bahrain, if it can threaten Saudi Arabia and the other oil-producing Arab states of the Persian Gulf region, then its influence over the global price of oil and over our economy will be enormous. They'd have a hand on our throat at that point. So I think we need particularly to focus on that, even as the headlines are dominated today by Libya.
Ambassador, I don't mean to be so crass here, but what if we're betting on the wrong horse? What if we're supporting rebels who hate us just as much, if not more, than the guy we want to kick out? And the same in a lot of these other countries where we're seeing uprisings that we at least vocally support, when in fact these guys are no fans of the United States, maybe even worse.
The risk is very great. Let's just take Libya as an example. In all honesty, we don't know who the opposition is. We don't know where their center of gravity is. I don't think the opposition knows where their center of gravity is. This is a rare case, a choice between Gaddafi on the one hand and uncertainty on the other. I would pick uncertainty, but I think in each of these countries, case by case, we have to be very careful of supporting the naive idea that opposition to an authoritarian government translates into support for democracy and support for the West. We may be seeing Egypt, for example, going in exactly the wrong direction. So the bottom line is we need to keep American strategic interest uppermost in our thoughts, not vague ideas about ideology, but clear American strategic interest.
Ambassador, you are in Iowa, where I guess you're testing the presidential waters. Now, when you were first mentioning this, and we have great respect and fondness for you here, I thought it was sort of like a pipe dream, no offense, I love you dearly. But now I'm thinking, with all the developments that have transpired in the world, and with the sort of diluted cast of potential Republican candidates, I mean, it's spread across, what, a dozen or more, you have a very sort of a credible message. Here, where we stand in the world, the U.S. reasserting itself, not doing that in the last few years. How is that resonating in Iowa?
Well, I think the political commentators do a real disservice to the American people when they say, oh, they don't care about foreign policy, they don't pay any attention to it. I think Americans very well understand that developments in the Middle East and Japan, elsewhere, can have a profound effect on their daily lives. Look at the cost of pumping gas into the tank of your car. So I'm going to talk about these issues. I think the president has been absent without leadership in his first 2 years in office. I think we need a real president to protect us internationally. And here in Iowa, where I can say it's very cold, we're going to start having these conversations.
All right. Well, I think those who routinely dismiss you do so at their own peril. I've been watching you closely. So that could actually be the kiss of death for you, Ambassador, but we'll see how it goes.
But thanks anyway.
Be well, my friend. John Bolton in Iowa. In the meantime,
thank you.